happy to invite you to our meeting. So, without further ado, Molly, come on up.
So excited.
So excited, I know. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Okay.
Because you know you better than I do.
Sounds good.
I just met her. And you're going to be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Great.
I can.
Hi. Well, thank you so much, Tony, for the invitation. And it's lovely to get to know you all and know about this organization. Oh, I'm so sorry. My background is in bee taxonomy, meaning learning the species and writing keys to species and genera and figuring out evolutionary relationships of bees. But we moved to San Diego about 14 years ago and started having kids. And I'm now a homeschooling mom who is really passionate about native plants and restoring. We live on a little bit of a canyon. And with Tony's help, have been restoring this canyon. So today I'm going to talk to you first, just three things today. The first thing is giving you a little overview of bees as a whole, their diversity, both in species and in natural history traits. And then secondly, I'm just going to present a few of our San Diego native bees that have evolved to specialize on some of our native plants. And then finally, I'm going to give you a little taste of my garden and what's been happening there. So let's address the elephant in the room first. When I say a honeybee, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with honeybees, and that's probably what most people think of when you say the word bee. Honeybees are absolutely fascinating, incredibly important in agricultural systems, not very diverse. Only 8 species worldwide, only 1 species here in San Diego. And we can compare that to, we know about 20,000 species of bees worldwide, maybe up to 25,000. 700 species here in San Diego County.
Wow.
About 1,600 in California as a whole, and about 4,000 species in the United States. So compare that to our eight honeybees, 1 species here in San Diego. But what they lack in species diversity, they more than make up for in abundance. They are not native to the New World. They were brought in the 1600s by Europeans. Really important in agricultural systems, and it turns out, we're finding out more and more, very impactful in pretty much any ecosystem that they're in. So when we say save the bees, feral honeybees are not in decline. I decided just to take a peek on iNaturalist to see how many photos of honeybees had been uploaded. 13,000 photos just in San Diego County. They are ubiquitous in Southern California, and some studies that have just come out recently out of UCSD, they estimate 98% of bee biomass in Southern California is the honeybee. This is 1 species out of 700 in our county. They also found that for some of the plants that they were looking at, 80% of pollen was removed in the first day by honeybees. They also estimate that if honeybees were not taking all the resources from the environment, then our native bee populations would be 50 times larger than they are today. So important, fascinating, very impactful in our native ecosystems.
Say that last one again. How many? How much increase would there be in native?
50 times.
50 times?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can think of them as vegetarian wasps. They evolved about 120 million years ago in the Cretaceous, along with flowering plants. We think they evolved from thrip collecting wasps that started eating the pollen that were on thrips. And so instead of getting their protein source for the next generation from these insects, they switched over to pollen, which is a protein-rich source. They are holometabolous insects. Oh, I skipped ahead. I'll go back to that in just a minute. They're holometabolous insects, which means they're just like butterflies. They have like their caterpillar stage, they have their pupal stage. It's just that we don't see their caterpillars, we don't see their larvae crawling around. These are all, for the most part, hidden away, and we're just seeing the adults. Let me swing back to this one. San Diego is a diversity hotspot. Unlike many species that are most diverse along the equator, bees as a whole tend to be most diverse in these middle latitudes. And speciation, we think, is driven by being in deserts with seasonal rainfall, driving blooms. There's something about that is driving bee speciation. Bees are incredibly important pollinators of plants because they depend on pollen for rearing their next generation. They are very dependent on flowering plants, and they have evolved many different unique morphologies for carrying pollen. And this is really, they also drive the persistence of having a diversity of flowers in a landscape. Okay, so where do bees live? About 70% of bees live in the ground, in soil. Another 30% live in wood, typically, in pith or in other types of wood. Within that, we have a distinction between those that actually dig their own nest, excavate their own nest, versus those that find existing holes, like beetle burrows, for example, and then rearrange house once they're there. They make their partitions and they leave the food for their young. We also have some masons that will take resin, they will take mud, they'll take sand, pebbles, things like that, and will actually create their nest, often on the surface of rocks. And then we have our brood parasites, or cuckoos, which are like parasitic birds that you may be familiar with. They actually steal the nest itself and the provisions laid by the host bee. Wide variety of range size. Just as an example, we have this Microlictoides ruficatus that's really restricted just to California floristic province in this small area, versus a major generalist bee in terms of types of flowers it goes to, and very wide range, Halictus tripartitus. Big range in body size. We have our smallest bee is Perdita minima at less than 2 millimeters long. And then our largest one is the Valley Carpenter bee at over 25 millimeters long. So here we have a little Perdita, or fairy bee, right on the face of the Xylocopa, or Carpenter bee. And then just to compare, here's something you might be more familiar with. Here's a honeybee. And then over on the side is the little Perdita, a different species. Okay, how do bees live? You will be familiar with honeybees and bumblebees. You can think of the queen and her daughters are all coexisting in this nest with division of labor. The daughter workers are all running around feeding the young, going out and doing the foraging. And mama bee, the queen, is there just pumping out eggs, basically. But this is actually somewhat unusual in terms of bee diversity as a whole, most of them are actually solitary, with a single female creating her own nest, going out, getting her own food for the young, depositing that in the nest, laying her own egg, sealing up that little cell within the nest, and never seeing her daughter. So this is the more common life history trait for bees. And then, of course, we have our cuckoo bees, our parasitic bees that are not out foraging for pollen and are not creating a nest. They're simply lurking. And then there are two different life history traits. Some of them will open up a nest that's been closed up and left by the mother and kill the host offspring and lay her egg. Or some other bees will actually sneak their egg in while the host is away gathering pollen. And some of these larvae become pretty gnarly. This is the first larval instar of a parasitic bee. Most bee larvae are little sausages. They just sort of sit around on their food. This guy, it has what we call hospicidal mandibles. So in the first instar, it will actually kill the host larva or egg, and then consume the pollen. The subsequent molts of this revert just back to being sausage again. Even cooler for these parasitic bees, the males offer a nuptial gift to the female when they're mating. This is Nomada, a different parasitic bee. It will actually produce, the male will produce a mandibular gland secretion that it coats the female with while mating. That makes it smell just like the host female's pheromones, so that when this lady is entering the nest, she is still disguised chemically from the host. So here's sort of a typical, this is a Triepeolus, this is a parasite here in Torrey Pines. We also have parasitic social bees. This is a bumblebee, that's a parasite. This is a female. Take a look at her hind leg and compare it to a typical bumblebee. You'll notice what's called a corbicula or pollen basket here on the hind leg, where they pack in the pollen. Honeybees and bumblebees and two other bees that aren't here in North America do this. The group is called corbiculata because they have this corbiculate structure here. But if you notice, the parasite doesn't have that. It's not out foraging pollen. It's just putting its eggs in someone else's nest. All right, what do bees eat? We have specialists and generalists. This, again, is a different sort of life history strategy that you can think of with trade-offs. The specialists are going to plants that are hard to digest typically. And if they can evolve a way to digest this hard to digest pollen, then they don't have to compete with other bees for that resource. But they're very dependent on that plant. The generalists are out competing with all the other bees for these easier to digest pollens, but they, so they aren't dependent on one particular plant that maybe doesn't emerge some year for whatever reason. So it's like all your eggs in one basket or spread it around, but then be in competition. By the way, this mining bee, Andrena osmioides, it's a specialist on Boraginaceae. And here in San Diego, Amsynchia is the plant it goes to. And I understand its pollen is difficult to process due to alkaloids. All right, so now let's look at a few more San Diego bees. I'm going to start with kind of the coastal up through Chaparral area. Two of the bees I'm going to highlight are in this bee genus called Didasia. They're called chimney or turret bees because the females make these cool little structures as they're making their nest down here. They'll pull out the soil and create these chimneys that we think may have to do with flood control or regulating humidity down in the nest, or even possibly helping keep parasites and predators out of the nest. So one of our Daidasia specializes on cacti, especially Opuntia and Cylindropuntia, the prickly pear or choyas. These pollens have secondary metabolites that are difficult to process. So they're sort of a chemical thing, but then they also have a mechanical thing. Somehow they're able to access the lower layer of anthers that can be difficult for some bees. We have a different Daidasia that is a specialist on sunflowers, like Encelia. And the pollen of sunflowers is spiky, and so they have their hairs on their hind leg that's transporting the spiky pollen is kind of widely spaced and long. Moving on again, back to the fairy bees. Here we have Perdita minima again against this quarter. We have a Perdita that is a specialist on Eschscholzia and its relatives. This is kind of a neat thing. When the poppy is closed up, it's such a small bee, it can actually work its way into the flower and reach the pollen before it's open to everybody else. So it gets like first dibs on the pollen. Another one that's a specialist on Calochordus. You can find males hiding in there waiting for females to come and mate with them.
Is it typical for them to have white faces, the fairy bees?
Often, yes, the males. Yeah. That's actually throughout bees as a whole. You'll often, I don't know why, but often the males will have, the clypeus will be a lighter color. And then we have a Dionomia that's actually a later season bee that's on Isocoma, which again is a later season plant. These are all solitary bees that I've been telling you about. So each female makes her own nest. Here's an example of a Dionomia nest in the sand. They can make really deep nests, surprisingly deep nests, like 3 to 4 feet deep into the soil. And then moving on to a little more of the mountainous area, like kind of the 16 area. We have a Hoplitus that is a specialist, again, on Boraginaceae. So it's using Cryptantha primarily, but it can also use Phacelia and Plagiobothres. This is a renter, so it uses abandoned beetle holes. And I'll show you a different Hoplitus species, but it'll give you a sense for what their nests look like. So they're entering these holes, and the Hoplitus is actually creating, it masticates leaf pulp, and then it will add in these pebbles and things like this to make a different room or cell for each of the offspring. And it'll create this, what we call bee bread. It's the pollen mixed with enzymes in their stomach to help digest the exime of the pollen. And then it'll have some other nectar mixed in there so that the pollen starts to get digested a little bit. It's easier for the young to actually eat. And there'll be some good like bacteria in there that is helpful for the bees. This Caliopsis is a specialist on Monardella. And then moving on, again, just a taste of some of these bees into more desert areas. We have this Andrina that's on Anisocoma. This Epimelosodius, I knew this recently. Its name changed. It used to be called Sphastra obliqua, but it's a Helianthus specialist and Encelia.
and others in that family. These we call these longhorn bees, this group, because the males have especially long antennae. And you can think of bee antennae like our noses. It's chemoreceptors in these antennae. And these bees are especially geared for finding female pheromones for the mating season. Here's a Sorothamnus specialist. Anthophora, these are really fast-flying bees. They can hover. You'll find in a lot of these desert bees, not all, of course, but some have these paler hairs, which we think helps with thermoregulation, reflecting the heat back off. So this one can fly when it's really hot, when a lot of other bees need to kind of take refuge in their nests. Another Sorothamnus specialist, Megachile browni. It's got these really long mandibles. That's the genus name. Megachile is in reference to the mandibles that a lot of these bees have. These are your leafcutter bees that make those neat little circles in your flower petals and things like that. They're actually bringing it back and lining their nests with these flower petals, and it helps with maintaining humidity and thermoregulation. But when you open some of these nests up, it's beautiful, just lovely leaf patterns.
Do you have a picture of that?
I don't on here, but it would be easy if you just like Google. Yeah, or any Megachile.
Oh,
Yeah,
Megachile.
any Megachile will do this sort of thing. Okay, so I hope I've given you a little taste. Bees are taxonomically and functionally diverse. We've got all these different ways in which they can vary from each other, and different combinations of traits that they display. So how are bees doing? Native bees are under pressure from a number of, the story is the same all over the place, right? But I'm just going to deal with habitat loss. So here is San Diego County. We've got Lake Murray in the bottom right. We've got Mission Trails in the top right. But, places that used to be full of native plants are no longer full of native plants. So I will admit I have kind of drunk the Kool-Aid as far as this whole homegrown national park idea that Doug Tallamy is promoting.
We read the book.
Did you? Yeah, and I love it. It makes me feel hopeful when it's easy to not feel hopeful. And this is something that I can do that's irrespective of current politics or what, so anyway, it's been a really great thing in my life. We moved to San Diego 14 years ago and bought our property 13 years ago. And I had been in the neighborhood for a long time. My parents moved into that neighborhood 25 years ago. And, you always hear San Diego, bee hotspot, diversity. And I walked around, the only thing I ever saw was honeybees. A few sweat bees, which are extreme generalists. It was pretty discouraging. So I started planting some native plants. And especially at the beginning, what helped me along was this website called Calscape. Perhaps you all know about it already, but it was new for me. And it's an incredible resource. I just, stuck in my zip code, and look at this, 1,542 plants native to my zip code. I mean, incredible. And then you can narrow it down. Like I had asked, what mallows could I plant that are native to my zip code? 15 different mallows. This is what I'm attracting Didasia with, those chimney bees. They just love the mallows in my area. Okay, so what do I have now 10 years later? I have these chimney bees, 2 different species of chimney bees. I have longhorn bees, mostly coming to my Encelia for the most part. I also, in my garden, I grew a really large sunflower, and it was actually nesting in the thick stem of the sunflower, some Melissodes. And then, you kind of forget, like, oh yeah, some of the things we grow to eat are actually native. So my zucchini plants actually have attracted this native bee, Xenoglossa pruminosa. From the sweat bee family, great diversity within that family. Of course, I still have sweat bees, but I also have greater diversity of bees within this family. 3 different bumblebees. The valley carpenter bee, which is sexually dimorphic. The male is this lovely, somebody said mustard color, and that's right. And then the female is black. I have these anthophoryans, which are awesome bees. They're super fast, zipping around. They hover in the spring when Salvia munsii is out. This habropoda comes to that. And then a little later in the summer, we have Anthophora on other sages. Small carpenter bees, Ceratina, they like the buckwheat. I even attracted a parasite, Triepeolus verbicini. And then I've got leafcutter bees and mason bees as well in my yard. And this is just casual observation. I'm not netting, I'm not pan trapping. I'm kind of to this point where I just don't love killing bees anymore. Not that I ever did love it, but like I don't want to anymore. So capturing by photographs is amazing. And then you upload it to iNaturalist and experts help you identify it. And then it's kind of a reciprocal relationship because then they have data points for whatever they're looking for, persistence of species or things like that. Lots of great books out right now. I brought some of them, the ones that I especially recommend. This one just came out. Crystal Hickman is doing amazing work with her camera, just traveling around. She's discovering all kinds of natural history information about bees just from going out and watching and taking her camera along. And then finally, we now have a Native Bee Society. It's brand new. It just started last fall. So monthly meetings on Zoom with different bee speakers. I highly recommend you join.
Wow.
And that's it.
Well, can you show that one slide?
Yes.
When you show the cutaway of the bee nest, it seemed that the larvae were in different stages of development.
They
Is
are.
that a problem if the first nest has somebody
Yeah.
come for the
Yeah. So yeah. It works out. But the bees will actually, they have a form of when bees first emerge from the nest, the females will mate and they store all the sperm from that mating in this organ called the spermatheca. And they determine the gender of their offspring based on whether or not they fertilize the egg as it's coming out. So unfertilized eggs are males, fertilized eggs are females. It's a system called haplodiploidy. So unlike humans where we all have 2 sets of chromosomes, the females have 2 sets, the males have 1 set. So they can determine, and they want the males at the top because the males emerge first and then they hang around waiting for the females to emerge so that they can mate. That all gets taken care of first thing in life. And then the males are, they don't persist that long. It's the females who are kind of running the show with bees. So yes. And they will also give more food. Not always, often the females are larger, but not always. There are some bee species where the male is larger. We do have territorial males in some of these species, and they tend to be larger. Yeah.
But yeah, they kind of determine who's going to emerge first and things
So
like
the
that.
more mature larvae are left,
Yeah.
do they?
Yeah, because it's coming in first. Yeah, they will actually come through. But the thing to remember, they are in diapause for a very long time. So all these bees will eat their bee bread. They will go through all their larval instars, become a pupa, and then they're underground or in their twig for most of the year. So they can catch up to each other, and they're just sort of in this resting state until the rains come and it's time to emerge and be with the flowers.
So let's say we're leaving some brush, and stems and stuff like that for the bees to hang out in.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any time that's like a good time to clear that away and restart again? Or do we just need to leave it alone all the time?
That's a tough one to answer because different bees have different strategies. So a lot of them will emerge with spring rains and will be with these flowers, but others are on fall plants. So it's just, yeah. I don't have a great, what I would say is maybe try to trim some, but leave some. But yeah.
Do they ever use fennel stalks?
Possibly. I don't know. It's possible. Because that is pretty similar to to the sunflower stalks, which I definitely did see. But, Google is an amazing resource. You might just try asking them.
A friend asked me to ask, and now that you have a bee society, are there any bee removals that are free still? Because my neighbor paid last year $280 for a guy to get him out of the airspace up in the roof, but he had to kill him, and he said by law they aren't permitted to unless it's invasive in your house.
Yeah. And these are honeybees, I assume.
Yeah, he said they were, but he had just come from another house where he got the queen, and he was opening the box to show me the queen's right there.
Yeah.
In the box, but he said it's become very expensive because he was coming from Valley Center to San Marcos.
Yeah, nothing is ever simple, is it? Like, part of me is saying they're the big bullies, right? They aren't letting these other bees persist. But then part of me is like, they're living creatures, and like maybe they could be rehomed to an agricultural system.
But are you saying the honeybees will kill the other bees?
They won't directly kill them, but they'll take away all the food.
So they'll dehydrate.
They outcompete. They outcompete. Yeah. And by the way, the other studies have shown that for native plants that have been pollinated by honeybees are not as viable as those pollinated by native bees. Honeybees are extreme generalists. They'll go all over the place and pass the pollen all over the place. A plant wants a bee that is going just to it, right? To put the pollen on the right flower. And honeybees can be a little rough with flowers too, apparently. Yes.
Black carpenter bees you showed?
Uh-huh.
Where are they now? I've got them all over.
In Deadwood.
Deadwood?
Mhm. Yeah.
Could you think more about the books that you, so I can not try them all? And and maybe put your slides back up and have all the pictures of all the-
Sure. Well, these are the ones that I especially recommend. Again, if you're just interested in learning about natural history of bees, this is incredible. She's an incredible photographer, and she tells you stories about the bees.
The actual name is what? It's, I see ABC.
ABCs of California native bees.
Okay.
And then this one's a little older, but this one is more just geared for gardeners. California bees and blooms.
You can go up there and take a picture of that
Yeah.
book with the author.
This one doesn't strictly talk about native plants. It also talks about other, the authors are in Northern California, so they have more of that bent, but they'll talk about other common garden plants that they found bees to go to. This one is Joe Wilson and Olivia Messenger Carroll. They both were from Utah State University. They were associated with the USDA Bee Lab. Amazing people, great people. And Joe Wilson has an Instagram site. I think he just calls it Bees in Your Backyard. And incredibly informative posts. I highly recommend if you just want to follow someone like that to learn about bees. But this was all of the United States, talking about different families and characters. Some nice kind of keys that are highly illustrated, meant for the layperson. And then they sort of, as their encore act, they did common bees of Western North America and common bees of Eastern North America. So it's basically this idea, but much more dedicated to your geographical area. Also just incredibly illustrated, gives you a sense of the diversity and why we group some bees in particular families. Yeah, this is a great book.
Are honeybees the only bees we put in beehives and propagate or reproduce a lot?
There's by far the main ones, but we also, there's a big push now to use the genus Osmia because you can get them to nest in blocks, in wood blocks, which you can take, even though they're solitary, each female has her own nest in that block, but that's something you can pick up and take to a farm. We use them especially for almond pollination because they emerge early in the spring.
Yeah, I noticed that when you showed the maps of bee distribution, it looks like there were no bees in maybe the Amazon rainforest area. I was wondering what pollinates plants there.
There are bees there. It's just not an area of high diversity for bees, but there are for sure bees there, especially up in the top of the tree canopies. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think beetles are especially diverse there and do a lot of pollinating.
It's being said that there's a high probability of a super El Nino happening. How is that going to affect bees?
Yeah. It'll probably be tough on them, but somehow bees are able to determine when rain is happening. And a lot of bees are able to just keep on in their hibernation mode for another year or even two to wait it out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Just remember that I went to a tour of the greenhouse on the Rio National Monument, and they're tracking bees, the native bees there. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, maybe the Bee Society or you or you.
Yeah, there's some neat groups out, like at Torrey Pines, for example, there's this group called the Wannabes that go out and they have these sort of regular transects sort of that they walk, and they aren't trapping, they're just taking photos and uploading everything to iNaturalist, and so they are documenting persistence or lack thereof of different bee species in that. And I know Cabrillo also has a sort of a similar program.
Would you go back to that bamboo
Yeah.
cutout slide? I, for the life of me, cannot figure out what's going on there.
Oh, sure.
I know you probably said it, but I couldn't make it match up with the image.
Okay, let me find it.
And I'm a little slow.
I'm sure you are not. This is just new. Oops.
Okay, so here's, you could imagine a twig, and it's like this, the end of the twig is facing that way.
Okay.
And it's probably fairly pithy. Our bees, the hoplitus that I showed you is using something that a beetle has excavated. Okay, this is, I don't know who excavated this, but I think this is bamboo, and they wouldn't be using bamboo here. But it's a similar setup. The bee will come all the way down and create an end part. Here's the pith that they've left. And they've made little rooms. So they'll start with this room first, go out and gather pollen, vomit on it, and they add some nectar, create this bee bread, lay its egg, and when the egg hatches, here we've got a larva. It's probably what we've got. This looks like an egg to me, and then we've got different instars of these larvae. So this maybe it's like a third instar, something like that. And it's eating, it just keeps eating this food that was left by the female, the mother. Once it's finished eating, it poops, and then it pupates. It becomes a pupa.
Or poopates.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. My old boss in New York was kind of the pioneer of studying larvae. Most people did not pay any attention to bee larvae, but he found all of these amazing characters that help explain evolutionary relationships between the bees, like little features like this little spiracle here or this little thing on the mandible. And it takes a special person.
But then continuing on, then what happens?
Yes, so then they seal up this little cell, and then they start all over again. Go out, get more pollen. Once they're done, they lay their egg, seal it up, and on until we get to the end. And then they're just adding a bunch of things to help close it off so that other organisms can't get in there and mess with the offspring.
And so then is that the same thing going on in the top, number 13 there, or what's all that?
I don't know what's going on with that. These two go together. They cut it and they open it like that.
So how do they emerge?
How do they get
Emerge it?
The adult bee is quite a bit larger, and it just is able to push its way out.
Or it has to push past the
Yeah.
brothers and sisters?
No, because these guys, so the females will be down here, the males will be up here. The males emerge first. And because they've got this whole year to finish developing, these guys will end up being at the same size and about ready to emerge at the same time.
Are the eggs routinely viable, or do they lay more than one egg in each chamber?
Great question. My sense is they do sometimes lay more than one egg, but for the most part, it's one egg.
So they've got a lot of confidence that it's going to
Yeah.
hatch.
And then also they, if you had a parasite, the ones that I'm most familiar with are nesting in the ground. And a lot of these ground nesting bees will actually paint the cells, those little rooms, with a dew-force gland secretion that ends up hardening into like a cellophane. That's like waterproofing for the nest. Some of these nests end up getting flooded. They're underwater for months at a time. And so there's often a little space between the cellophane lining and the dirt that some of these parasitic bees will actually shove their egg into that lining to sort of escape detection. So it's not just out here free. And you might find if you open up one of these nests, there'll be multiple parasites within the nest. And that's just bee parasites. There are other organisms that are there trying to eat and parasitize the nest.
Your title is, if you build it, they will come. Are you talking about building a hive?
I'm talking about, well, I just happened to notice that was my title. So I think
the idea is like if you provide habitat, you can attract life back into your home. And
Yeah, are you familiar with solar bee?
yeah.
Candace brand new mold or something like that?
Yeah.
I have one of her nests, one of her towers, bee towers, and I've never put it out. When is the best time to put it out? It's for native bees.
It is, and it will attract, ideally, things like Osmia, the mason bee that's being moved around into almond orchards.
And it should be a shady spot or a sunny spot or.
I don't know for sure. I do have one. I put it out. It's never been that attractive to my bees in my yard. It may just be that the particular species that especially like nesting there, it may just be ones that we don't have. But it's worth a try. I mean, if it is there, if you do attract them, hey, you can watch them.
Do you think it has something to do with disturbing the native soil? If we've disturbed the native soil in our area, that they're not going to be attracted to come and move in because, there may be an apartment building there for them, but they're not around to notice it. I don't know. Because they normally nest in the soil, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to create some other place for them to live. And
oh, well, no, the bees that nest in the soil, and the bees that nest in wood just nest in wood.
Okay.
So it may be a matter of those wood nesting bees finding it. As far as the soil nesting bees, there is a lot there in terms of a lot of these bees need bare soil, or they need really compacted soil, or they need sandy soil. Like they have particular needs. But I mean, it is possible they do come. My sense is that, and in fact, the work that Jess Mullins and James Hahn have done at UCSD, they're comparing these larger habitats with the smaller fragments in the canyons. And their work seems to suggest that if you want the really specialized bees, you really do kind of need those larger fragments. Those are the ones that drop out first, that the canyons still have more of the generalist bees. And that has been my experience thus far with my yard, is that I'm mostly getting generalist bees. But I'm happy to get them. I mean,
whatever.
right. Yeah.
Any bees, okay.
Exactly. And then that's just bees. What's really driving, bird diversity is what kind of moths are you attracting to your yard? And I mean, that's just one tiny little slice of the whole diversity that's you're gaining.
Do all bees sting?
It's just a female. The sting is a modification of the ovipositor. So if like maybe you've seen photos of these wasps that have these really long ovipositors, they're sticking them into wood to lay their egg on other grubs inside the wood or things like that. That's the ovipositor. It's an egg-laying organ that the bee it's evolved to no longer use that as an egg-laying organ. It's now a defensive mechanism. So it's just female.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Is the honeybee the only bee with a fish hook?
With the barbs, yes. Again, honeybees are so weird. But most bees can sting multiple times. Most of them won't because they don't have this huge resource that they're defending. It's just, why would a bee, unless you're like actively smooshing them, they have no reason to sting you.
So most bees have stingers, but they won't sting. But I still don't understand if these other bees are so important. I know we have those things where they have holes in the block and that brings them to your area, but what brings it in a large like we have beehives of honeybees, but how do we get large populations of these other bees?
Of the mason bees. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Like they'll take these blocks once the bees are done pollinating the almonds. They actually will remove all the cocoons from they call them cocoons, where the pupa is. They'll pull them all out. Sometimes they'll x-ray them to see like, are they alive? Are they dead? They only take the right ones, and then they'll stick them in new nesting blocks. And sometimes I think even refrigerate them, like it's a whole thing. And then when it's time, they'll bring them back out and drive them to the field that they want.
So, we have some refrigerator, and it's pollinated food within our polygon garden. And one of the guys started making these, we call them bee hotels. And they've drilled exactly the right length, exactly the right width for a variety of bees in each block. What do we do after, and they do attract bees, and is it mostly leafcutter bees? I guess, so they go in there and they just keep, like that.
Yeah, it's the Megachilides and the Osmias, yeah. So these are bees in the family Megachilidae, and all bees in this family carry pollen on their belly instead of their hind legs. So that's it. You can, if you're looking at them, look to see is the pollen on the hind leg or on the belly. If it's on the belly, then it's in that whole family Megachilidae that has the mason bees and the leafcutter bees.
So I just got my bee hotel, and my friends all have bees in theirs already. And so what do I do at the end? Do I clean it out later to reuse it, or will they clean it out? Or
I think I remember vaguely that someone recommended you do clean it out to help with pathogens not building up. But like, I think some of these you put straws in the holes, and then you can just remove the straw. Once the bees have emerged, you can put fresh straws in to help with pathogens.
Are just the drill holes.
But
It's a drill and you drill it out. Clean it all out.
Buy a broom, get some straw, stick it in there.
But again, I would double check all of this. This is not something.
Go rentmasonbees.com. They tell you how to clean the bee houses out in cold.
So I would say, my personal opinion, if you want to attract native bees, provide the habitat, provide the plants.
As long as it's not.
I like, as far as like all this shipping of bees around and buying things at stores, you're running into the same problem with honeybees and pathogens, like coming around and spreading your germs to each other. The reason why we have some bumblebees on the endangered species list now is because it's an interesting story. There are some bumblebee species that people wanted to use in agricultural systems, but they weren't sure how to rear them. So they sent them off to somewhere in Europe, where they were already rearing bumblebees in agricultural systems. They worked out, okay, this is how you're going to manage for this species of native bumblebee to the US. Sent it back. These bees had picked up pathogens. So, and then these bees escaped the greenhouses and they spread their pathogens to the other bumblebees. And because of that, we have 3 different bumblebee species that are in severe decline. And it's traced back to that. Wow. So I would say, plant native plants. And leave.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what
And you didn't get one of these tickets. It's ticket time. It's ticket time.